The smell of yeast and burnt sugar clung to my clothes as I pushed through the heavy door of O'Malley's pub. After 14 hours on my feet, my lower back throbbed with each step, and flour still dusted the creases of my jeans, despite 3 attempts to brush it away. The dim lighting and low hum of conversation wrapped around me like a welcome blanket, so different from the bright chaos of Dolce Mattina, my tiny bakery wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop in Little Italy. "Rough day?" Marco, the bartender, asked as I collapsed onto a stool near the end of the bar. He was already pouring my usual, a whiskey neat that I'd learned to appreciate during the grueling first year of business ownership. "The espresso machine died during morning rush," I said, accepting the glass gratefully. Then I burned 3 batches of biscotti because I was trying to fix it myself. And Mrs. Ricci came in to complain that last week's cannoli weren't sweet enough. I took a long sip, feeling the burn slide down my throat. "Sweet enough. Can you believe that?" Marco chuckled, his weathered face crinkling with sympathy. "Mrs. Ricci complained when my grandmother made her cannoli, and that woman was Sicilian. Don't take it personal. Alessia." I knew he was right, but exhaustion made everything feel heavier tonight. 25 years old, and some days I felt ancient. My mother would have laughed at that, would have told me in her musical Italian accent that I didn't know what tired meant. But Mom had been gone for 3 years now, and the bakery, her dream that I'd inherited along with her recipes and her debts, was my responsibility alone. "Another?" I said, pushing the empty glass toward Marco. He raised an eyebrow, but poured. The second drink went down easier than the first, the third easier still. By the fourth, the edges of the world had softened pleasantly, and I found myself laughing at Marco's stories about the regular customers, at nothing and everything. "You should slow down," he suggested gently, but I waved him off. "I'm celebrating," I announced, my words slightly slurred. "Celebrating that I didn't burn down my own bakery today. That's worth drinking to, right?" The stool beside me scraped against the floor as someone sat down. I glanced over, my vision swimming slightly, and found myself looking at a man who seemed carved from shadows and expensive wool. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders that tapered to a narrow waist. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to a Renaissance painting, all sharp angles and hooded eyes the color of espresso. He ordered something in Italian, his voice a low rumble that made my skin prickle with awareness, despite the alcohol dulling my senses. Marco nodded, suddenly looking nervous in a way I'd never seen before, and hurried to pour what looked like a very specific, very expensive whiskey. "That's fancy," I heard myself say, pointing at his glass. "I'm drinking the cheap stuff. The stuff that makes you forget you spent 12 hours kneading dough and arguing with suppliers about flour prices." The man turned to look at me, and I felt the full weight of his attention like a physical thing. His eyes were darker up close, almost black in the dim lighting, and they studied me with an intensity that should have sobered me up. Instead, emboldened by whiskey and exhaustion, I smiled at him. "You look like a bad boy," I announced, the words tumbling out before my filter could catch them. "Like a really bad boy, the kind my mother would have warned me about." I laughed, delighted by my own observation. "Are you? A bad boy?" Something flickered in those dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. The corner of his mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. "You have no idea," he said, his accent similar to Marco's, but somehow more refined, more dangerous. "That's not an answer," I pointed out, wagging my finger at him. "You're being mysterious. I don't like mysterious. I like honest. Like brutally honest." I gestured expansively, nearly knocking over my glass. "You know what I told Mrs. Ricci today? I told her that if she wants sweeter cannoli, she should go to Ferrara's on Taylor Street. They put enough sugar in theirs to give you diabetes just from looking at them." "Did you really?" He sounded genuinely curious now, leaning slightly closer. No, I admitted, giggling. But I wanted to. Instead, I smiled and said I'd adjust the recipe. Which I won't, because my mother's recipe is perfect, and Mrs. Ricci is wrong. I took another sip of whiskey. See? Honest. Brutally honest. That's me. Alessia, Marco interrupted, his voice tight with something I couldn't identify through my pleasant haze. Maybe you should head home. I'll call you a cab. I'm fine, I protested, but even as I said it, the room tilted slightly. The man beside me moved with fluid grace, his hand steadying my elbow before I could slide off the stool. Easy, he murmured, and I found myself looking up into those impossibly dark eyes. Up close, I could see silver threaded through his hair at the temples, could smell something woodsy and expensive, cedar maybe, or sandalwood. You smell good, I informed him solemnly, like really good. Not like flour and burnt sugar. That's what I smell like, always. It's in my hair, my clothes, probably my skin at this point. I laughed again, the sound slightly unsteady. But you smell like money and danger. Is that weird? That I can smell danger? Perhaps you're more perceptive than you think, he said, his lips quirking into an almost smile that transformed his severe features into something unexpectedly warm. Marco appeared with a glass of water, which the stranger handed to me with quiet insistence. I drank obediently, some part of my brain recognizing that I should probably be more cautious around a man I'd just met, especially one who radiated the kind of controlled power that made the air around him feel charged. I should go, I said, attempting to stand. The world swayed alarmingly, and suddenly his arm was around my waist, supporting me with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his dangerous appearance. I'll take you home, he said, not asking. That's very bad boy of you, I mumbled against his shoulder, which smelled even better up close. Taking advantage of drunk women. My mother definitely would have warned me about you. I'm taking you home safely, he corrected, amusement coloring his voice. There's a difference. Where do you live? I gave him my address, barely registering Marco's wide-eyed expression as the stranger guided me toward the door. A sleek black car materialized at the curb, driven by a thick-necked man who looked like he could break someone in half without much effort. Who are you? I asked as he helped me into the back seat, his hand cradling my head so I wouldn't hit the doorframe. Vincenzo, he said simply. Just Vincenzo? Like Cher? Or Madonna? I giggled at my own joke. I'm Alessia Amato. I own Dolce Mattina on Halsted. You should come by sometime. I make the best sfogliatelli in Chicago. Better than Ferrara's. Though don't tell anyone I said that. I won't, he promised, sliding in beside me and giving the driver my address. The drive passed in a blur of streetlights and soft leather. I found myself listing against Vincenzo's solid shoulder, his arm coming around me in a gesture that felt protective rather than predatory. Through my alcoholic haze, I registered that this should concern me more than it did, that getting into a car with a stranger was dangerous, that my mother would be furious if she knew. But there was something about him, about the way he handled me with careful respect, about the warmth in his eyes when I'd called him a bad boy, that made me feel unexpectedly safe. You really do look like trouble, I mumbled into his shoulder as the car pulled up outside my apartment building. The very handsome kind of trouble. He helped me out of the car and up the 2 flights of stairs to my door, waiting patiently while I fumbled for my keys. When I finally got the door open, he steadied me in the doorway. Will you be all right? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. I nodded, suddenly feeling the full weight of the evening's alcohol hitting me. Thank you. Vincenzo, who's like Cher. You're a gentleman bad boy, the best kind. Something shifted in his expression, an emotion I couldn't name flashing across his features before being carefully controlled. Get some rest, Alessia. Drink water before you sleep. Will I see you again? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His smile was slow, dangerous, and completely disarming. "Yes, I think you will." As I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to his footsteps recede down the hallway, I had the strange, inexplicable feeling that my life had just tilted on its axis, that the handsome stranger with the expensive suit and the dangerous eyes had somehow become important in a way I couldn't yet understand. I stumbled to bed, still wearing my flour-dusted clothes, and dreamed of dark eyes and woodsy cologne, and a voice that promised both danger and safety in the same breath. The hangover arrived with the dawn, pounding behind my eyes with vicious enthusiasm. I dragged myself out of bed, swallowed 3 aspirin with a liter of water, and somehow made it to the bakery by 5 a.m. to start the day's baking. My head throbbed with each movement, but muscle memory carried me through mixing dough, shaping loaves, preparing the cases for the morning rush. By the time I flipped the sign to open at 7, I'd almost convinced myself that last night had been an alcohol-induced hallucination. Surely I hadn't called a complete stranger a bad boy. Surely I hadn't gotten into his car, hadn't pressed against his shoulder, hadn't asked if I'd see him again. The memory made me cringe as I served Mrs. Chen her usual sesame bread and espresso. Professional, I reminded myself. I was a professional business owner, not some silly girl who got drunk and flirted with dangerous-looking men. The morning rush came and went. I was restocking the cannoli case when the door chimed, and I looked up to find Vincenzo standing in my bakery. He looked different in daylight, or perhaps I was simply sober enough to see him clearly. The expensive suit remained, this time a navy that made his dark eyes even more striking, but what caught my attention was the way he surveyed the small space, with the same intense focus he'd turned on me last night, as if cataloging every detail, every entrance and exit, every potential threat. "You came," I said stupidly, heat flooding my cheeks. I'm sorry about last night. I don't usually drink like that, or call people bad boys, or accept rides from strangers." "You were honest," he said, approaching the counter with that same fluid grace I remembered. I appreciated it. Up close, in the bright overhead lights, I could see more details I'd missed. A small scar near his left eyebrow. The way his jaw was just slightly asymmetrical, as if it had been broken once and healed imperfectly. Hands that looked powerful, despite their elegant shape, with knuckles that showed the faint shadows of old scars. "What can I get you?" I asked, forcing myself into professional mode. "The sfogliatelle are fresh from the oven, and I have some excellent biscotti if you're looking for something to go with coffee." "The sfogliatelle," he decided, "and an espresso. You mentioned yours were better than Ferrara's." I couldn't help but smile at that. I was drunk when I said that. "But you meant it." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I admitted. "I absolutely meant it." As I prepared his order, I felt his eyes on me, watching with that same unsettling intensity. Most of my customers chatted while I worked, shared gossip about the neighborhood, complained about the weather or the cubs. Vincenzo simply watched, silent and observant, as if I were something worth studying. "Here," I said, sliding the plate across the counter. The sfogliatelle was perfect, if I said so myself. The layers of pastry shell crisp and golden. The ricotta filling just the right balance of sweet and creamy. He took a bite, his expression remaining carefully neutral. But I saw the slight widening of his eyes, the barely perceptible nod of approval. "You were right," he said finally. "Better than Ferrara's." The compliment warmed me more than it should have. "My mother's recipe. She learned it from her grandmother in Naples." "Your mother?" he prompted gently. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer." The words still hurt to say, but less than they used to. She always wanted to open a bakery in Chicago. This was her dream. I gestured at the small space around us. "I'm just trying to keep it alive." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes that made him look less dangerous and more human. She would be proud. We talked as he finished his pastry and espresso. Or rather, I talked, the words flowing easily despite my usual reserve with customers. I told him about the challenges of running a small business, about the constant battle with suppliers and rent and health inspectors, about how some mornings I wondered if it was worth it, if I should give up and get a normal job with normal hours and a normal paycheck. But then someone like Mrs. Chen comes in, I said, and she tells me that my sesame bread reminds her of her childhood in Taiwan, even though it's not the same at all. Or Mr. Rossi says my focaccia is almost as good as his mother's used to make. And I remember why I do this. Because you make people happy, Vincenzo observed. Is that silly? I asked. Making happiness out of flour and sugar and butter? No. His voice was firm, almost fierce. It's not silly at all. He came back the next day, and the day after that, always in the late morning, after the rush had subsided but before the lunch crowd arrived, always ordering something different, the cannoli, the biscotti, the fig cookies my mother used to make only at Christmas. We fell into a rhythm, a strange friendship built on 30-minute conversations amid the smell of baking bread. He asked questions, listened with that intense focus, seemed genuinely interested in the minutiae of my days. I found myself looking forward to his visits, to the way his presence made the cramped bakery feel less lonely. I learned small things about him through careful observation. The way he always sat where he could see the door. How his phone rang constantly, but he always silenced it when talking to me. The expensive watch on his wrist, the kind that cost more than 6 months of my rent. The way other people in the neighborhood reacted to him, respectful, bordering on fearful, giving him a wide berth on the sidewalk. "What do you do?" I asked one day, 2 weeks into our routine. "For work, I mean. You're always in a suit, but you never seem to be in a hurry to get anywhere." He smiled, that slow, dangerous smile I'd come to recognize. "Import and export, family business." "That's vague," I observed. "It is," he agreed, not elaborating. "Are you being mysterious again?" I challenged, hands on my hips. "Because I told you, I don't like mysterious. I know, you like honest." He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes holding mine. "But sometimes, Alessia, honesty can be dangerous." A shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with cold. "Are you dangerous, Vincenzo?" "Yes." No hesitation, no attempt to soften the truth. "To some people, never to you." I should have been frightened, should have recognized the warning for what it was, and asked him to leave, to stop coming to my bakery. Instead, I found myself drawn to that honesty, to the way he answered my questions without flinching, even when the answers revealed shadows I couldn't quite see. By the 3rd week, I caught myself watching the door at 10:30, waiting for him to arrive. Caught myself saving back the best sfogliatella of the morning, the one with the most perfect layers. Caught myself wearing lip gloss to work, something I never bothered with normally. "You like him," my assistant Rosa observed one afternoon after Vincenzo had left. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who'd known my mother and had strong opinions about everything. "He's a customer," I protested weakly. Rosa didn't look convinced. "A customer who you smile at like he's bringing you sunshine. A customer who looks at you like you're something precious he wants to protect. He doesn't." "He does," she interrupted, "and everyone in this neighborhood sees it. Do you know who he is, Alessia?" "Vincenzo Catalano. He imports and exports things." Rosa's expression turned grave. "He's Vincenzo Catalano, Don Catalano's son, the man who runs the entire North Side." The words hung in the air between us. I knew what she meant, what she was really saying. Mafia. The word we didn't say out loud in Little Italy, but everyone understood. "I don't believe that," I said, but even as I spoke, pieces were clicking into place. The expensive clothes, the way people treated him, the guards I'd seen waiting outside in black SUVs, the vague answers about his work. "Believe it or don't," Rosa said gently. "But be careful, Dolcezza. Men like that, they live in a different world than us. And that world is dangerous." That night, alone in my apartment, I Googled Vincenzo Catalano. The results were sparse, deliberate vagueness that spoke volumes. A few society page photos from charity events, always in the background, never the focus. Business licenses for legitimate companies. No criminal record, but then, men at that level rarely had ones. And underneath it all, rumors, whispers, the kind of reputation that existed in shadows and careful words. I should have stopped seeing him. Should have told him to find another bakery, another place to spend his mornings. But when he walked through my door the next day, his dark eyes lighting up at the sight of me, all my resolutions crumbled like day-old biscotti. "Alessia," he said, my name sounding like something precious in his mouth. "Vincenzo," I replied, already reaching for the sfogliatella I'd saved for him. And just like that, I knew I was in trouble. The kind of trouble my mother would have warned me about. The kind I was walking into anyway, eyes wide open. It was Rosa's scream that shattered the comfortable routine I'd built around Vincenzo's visits. I was in the back, pulling a fresh batch of olive bread from the oven, when I heard her cry out. The tray clattered to the floor as I ran to the front of the shop, my heart hammering against my ribs. Rosa stood frozen behind the counter, her face pale, staring at two men who had just entered. They weren't customers. Everything about them, from their cheap suits to the way they positioned themselves to block the door, screamed threat. "Where is he?" the taller one demanded in English heavily accented with what sounded like Russian. "Where is Catalano?" "I don't know who you're talking about," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is a bakery. If you're not here to buy something, don't play stupid." The shorter man moved toward the counter, and I saw the bulge under his jacket that could only be a weapon. "We know he comes here. Every day like clockwork. Where is he?" "I'm right here." Vincenzo's voice came from behind them, soft and deadly. I hadn't heard the door open, hadn't seen him arrive. He simply materialized, and suddenly the two men were the ones who looked afraid. "Catalano." The taller man turned, trying to maintain his bravado, but failing. "Our boss wants to talk to you. About territories. About arrangements." "Then your boss can call my office like civilized people do." Vincenzo's voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something cold and absolutely merciless. "He doesn't send men to a bakery. To terrorize innocent women. We weren't... Get out." 2 words, quietly spoken, that carried more threat than any shout. "And tell Sergei that if any of his men come within 2 blocks of this place again, I will consider it a declaration of war." The men fled. Actually fled, stumbling over each other in their haste to reach the door. Through the window, I watched them climb into a black sedan and speed away. Vincenzo turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "No, we're fine," I said, but my hands were shaking. Rosa had sunk onto a stool, fanning herself with a newspaper. "Madonna mia," she breathed. "Madonna mia." "Rosa, go home," Vincenzo said, his voice gentling. "Take the rest of the day off, with pay," he added, glancing at me. After Rosa left, still muttering prayers, Vincenzo locked the front door and flipped the sign to "closed." I wanted to protest, to tell him he couldn't just close my business. But the words died in my throat when I saw his expression. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes," I agreed. "We really do." We sat at one of the small tables by the window, the afternoon sun streaming through and illuminating the fine dust of flour that always seemed to hang in the air. For the first time since I'd met him, Vincenzo looked uncertain, his powerful hands clenched on the table between us. "You know what I am," he said finally, not a question. "I've heard rumors. Rosa told me. I met his eyes, refusing to look away. Are they true? Are you really what she says you are? Yes. That same unflinching honesty I'd come to expect from him. My father was Don Catalano. When he died 5 years ago, I took his place. I run the family's interests on the north side, legitimate and otherwise. Otherwise, I repeated numbly. You mean illegal? Criminal? Yes. He didn't try to soften it, to make excuses. I'm not going to lie to you, Alessia. I've done things that would horrify you. Things I'm not proud of, but things that were necessary to protect what's mine. I absorbed this, trying to reconcile the brutal reality with the man who had spent the last month eating pastries in my bakery, who listened to my stories with genuine interest, who looked at me like I was something precious. Why did you come here? I asked. That first morning after the bar, why did you keep coming back? His expression softened. Because you called me a bad boy and meant it as an insult. Because you were honest with me in a way no one else dares to be. Because when I'm here, in your bakery, I get to be just Vincenzo. Not Don Catalano, not the head of the family. Just a man who likes sfogliatelle and the woman who makes them. I'm not some escape from your life, I said, anger flaring despite my fear. I'm not a fantasy you can visit when you need a break from being a criminal. I know that. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. You're real, Alessia. The only real thing in my life. And that's why this is so dangerous. What do you mean? He withdrew his hand, running it through his hair in frustration. Those men today, they're from the Volkov organization. Russians trying to muscle into our territory. They've been looking for leverage, for any weakness they can exploit. And now, they know about you. The implications settled over me like a shroud. They know you care about me, so I'm a target. Yes. The word was heavy with regret. Which is why I need to stop coming here. Need to stay away from you, keep you safe. Something fierce rose in my chest, surprising me with its intensity. Don't I get a say in this? In whether you stay or go? Alessia? No. I stood, planting my hands on the table. You don't get to make decisions about my life without asking me. You don't get to decide what's safe for me. That's my choice. He looked up at me, surprise and something else, something that looked almost like hope, crossing his features. You don't understand what you're saying, what being involved with me means. Then explain it to me, honestly. No more vague answers about import and export. And so he did. For the next hour, as the afternoon light shifted through the windows and the closed bakery grew quiet around us, Vincenzo told me the truth. About his family's history in Chicago, about the territory wars and the truces, about the gray areas where legitimate business blurred into something darker, about the violence he'd ordered, the men he'd hurt, the weight of responsibility for hundreds of people who depended on the family for their livelihood. He didn't try to make it palatable, didn't try to paint himself as anything other than what he was, a man who had inherited a position of power and had done what was necessary to maintain it, regardless of the cost to his soul. I'm not a good man, Alessia, he finished. I'm exactly the bad boy you called me that first night. Worse, actually. I sat with this information, turning it over in my mind. Everything in me should have been screaming to run, to get as far from Vincenzo Catalano as possible. But instead, I found myself thinking about the way he'd protected Rosa and me today, the gentleness in his hands when he'd steadied me that drunken night, the authentic interest he'd shown in my life and work. I need time, I said finally, to think about this, about what it means. Relief flooded his features. Of course, I'll arrange for security, men to watch the bakery, make sure you're safe while you... No. The word came out sharper than I intended. No guards, no protection. If I'm going to make a choice, I need to make it freely. Not because I'm surrounded by your men, not because I'm afraid of the Russians or anyone else." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. 3 days. That's all I can give you. After that, if you tell me to leave, I will. But I'm placing guards whether you like it or not, non-negotiable." "Fine." I crossed my arms. 3 days. He stood, and for a moment we simply looked at each other across the small table, the space between us filled with everything unsaid. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek with infinite tenderness. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "you're the best thing that's happened to me in 5 years, maybe in my whole life." After he left, I sat alone in my closed bakery, surrounded by the comforting smells of bread and sugar, and tried to make sense of my own heart. The smart choice was obvious. Run. Cut all ties with Vincenzo Catalano and his dangerous world. Go back to my simple life of early mornings and cranky customers and flour-dusted clothes. But I couldn't stop thinking about the fear in his eyes when he'd thought those men might have hurt me. The honesty in his voice when he'd laid bare all his sins. The way he'd given me a choice, even though I could see it was killing him to let me have one. I'd called him a bad boy that night in the bar, drunk and careless. But bad boys didn't look at women the way Vincenzo looked at me. Bad boys didn't spend their mornings eating pastries and listening to stories about flour suppliers. Bad boys didn't offer to walk away to keep someone safe. Bad boys didn't break their own hearts to protect someone else's. I picked up my phone and stared at it for a long moment before typing out a text to the number he'd given me 3 weeks ago, the one I'd never used. "I need more than 3 days. But I'm not telling you to leave. Not yet." His response came almost immediately. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait." And somehow I knew he would. No matter how long it took, Vincenzo Catalano would wait for me to make my choice. Because beneath the dangerous exterior, beneath the title and the power and the blood on his hands, he was a man who had learned to love someone who saw him for exactly what he was. The question was whether I was brave enough to love him back. 3 days turned into a week. I didn't close the bakery again, didn't hide away to think. Instead, I threw myself into work with almost manic energy, arriving earlier and staying later, kneading dough until my arms ached and my mind went blissfully blank. Vincenzo kept his word. He didn't come to the bakery, but I saw evidence of his protection everywhere. The black SUV parked across the street with its occupants changing in 8-hour shifts, the way Mrs. Ricci stopped complaining about everything, as if someone had suggested such complaints might be unhealthy. The envelope of cash that appeared in my mail slot with no note, just enough to cover the espresso machine repair I'd been putting off. "He's courting you," Rosa observed on the 5th day, watching me stare at the SUV through the window. "The old-fashioned way, showing you he can provide, can protect." "It's manipulative," I muttered, but without much conviction. "Is it?" Rosa arranged biscotti in the display case with practiced efficiency. "Or is it honest? He told you what he is. Now he's showing you what that means. Protection, resources, a life where you wouldn't have to worry about espresso machines or supplier bills." "I don't want his money." "No?" She gave me a knowing look. "Then what do you want? Dolcezza?" I couldn't answer that question, not honestly, because the truth was, I wanted Vincenzo. I wanted his morning visits and his careful attention, and the way he looked at me like I was the solution to a problem he'd been trying to solve his whole life. I wanted the man who ate sfogliatelle and listened to me complain about Mrs. Ricci, not the Don who ordered violence and controlled territories. But I was beginning to understand that I couldn't have one without the other. They were the same person, inextricably linked. On the 8th day, I made my decision. I closed the bakery early, at 2 instead of 5, leaving Rosa to handle the late afternoon customers. The address I'd gotten from my phone's GPS led me to a neighborhood I'd never visited. Upscale brownstones with manicured lawns and expensive cars parked at the curb. Vincenzo's house was at the end of the street, a 3-story brownstone that managed to look both elegant and fortress-like. I knew security cameras had tracked my approach long before I rang the bell. The man who answered the door was thick-necked and armed, his jacket failing to conceal the weapon at his hip. "I'm here to see Vincenzo," I said, lifting my chin. "Alessia Amato." Recognition flickered across his face. "Wait here." He returned 2 minutes later with Vincenzo himself, who looked stunned to find me on his doorstep. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous than the expensive suits. "Alessia." My name came out rough, uncertain. "Is something wrong? Are you safe? Can I come in?" He stepped aside immediately, dismissing the guard with a subtle gesture. I entered a space that was somehow both luxurious and austere. Expensive furniture arranged with military precision. No personal photographs or decorations to reveal anything about the man who lived here. "This way," he said, leading me to a study lined with books and dominated by a massive desk. "Can I get you something? Water? Coffee?" "Answers," I said. "I need answers before I can make a choice." He gestured to a leather chair before settling into one across from it, giving me space. "Ask me anything." "The violence," I began. "The hardest question first. The things you've done. Will they ever stop? Can you walk away from that life?" His expression turned grave. "I won't lie to you. No, I can't walk away. The family needs someone at its head, someone who understands how the system works. If I step down, there would be chaos, fighting for control. People would die, innocent people caught in the crossfire. So you're trapped. By choice and by responsibility." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But the violence, that's changed over the years. I've worked to legitimize as much of our operation as possible. The drugs, the prostitution, I've shut all of that down. It cost me allies, made enemies, but I don't traffic in human suffering. Not anymore." "But you still hurt people." "Yes." No hesitation. "When they threaten what's mine, when they break the rules we all agreed to follow. I'm not asking you to approve, Alessia. Just to understand that the world I live in has different rules, different necessities." I absorbed this, studying his face. "If I choose to be with you, what does that make me? An accessory? A mob wife living in denial?" "It makes you my conscience," he said softly. "The one person who can tell me when I'm going too far, who sees me as a man instead of a title. You asked me once if I was a bad boy. The truth is, I've been trying to be better, not good. Maybe that's impossible for someone like me. But better, less ruthless, more human." "Because of me?" I asked, surprised. "Because of you." He held my gaze. "Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be more than the role I inherited. You make me want to be worthy of the way you look at me." My heart clenched at the raw honesty in his voice. "I'm scared, Vincenzo. Scared of your world. Scared of becoming someone I don't recognize. Scared of losing myself." "I know." He didn't move closer, didn't try to touch me. "And I'm scared too. Scared of putting you in danger. Scared of tainting something pure with the darkness I carry. Scared that one day you'll look at me and see a monster instead of a man." "I don't see a monster," I admitted quietly. "I see someone trying to be good in a world that doesn't allow for easy choices. Someone carrying responsibilities he didn't choose but honors anyway." "Is that enough?" His voice was barely audible. "For you to choose me?" I stood, moving to the window that overlooked a private garden. "My mother used to say that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone whose imperfections you could live with, whose struggles you could support." "Your mother sounds wise." She was. I turned to face him, earned to. She also said that everyone deserves honesty, especially in love. And you've been honest with me, Vincenzo. Brutally, painfully honest. Even when the truth was ugly. Hope flickered in his dark eyes, quickly suppressed. "I will never lie to you, Alessia. That's a promise." "I believe you." I crossed the space between us, standing before him. "And I need you to promise me something else. That you'll never make decisions about my life without consulting me. That you'll treat me as a partner, not a possession to be protected." He stood slowly, his hands hovering near my shoulders but not quite touching. "I promise, but the protection, the security, that's non-negotiable. Not to control you, but because I couldn't survive losing you. Do you understand?" I nodded, finally understanding the fear beneath his control. "I need your guards to be discreet. I need to still feel like my life is my own." "Done." His hand settled gently on my shoulders. "Anything else?" "The bakery stays mine. My business, my decisions. You don't interfere. Don't throw money at problems I need to solve myself." "Agreed. Though I reserve the right to be your most devoted customer. And if I ever say stop, if I ever say this isn't working, you let me go. No threats, no intimidation, no making it impossible for me to leave." Something painful crossed his face, but he nodded. "I swear it, on my life, on everything I hold sacred. If you want to walk away, I'll let you go." I searched his eyes, looking for deception, for manipulation. I found only sincerity, and a love so fierce it nearly stole my breath. "Then I choose you," I said simply. "I choose us. Whatever that means, whatever it costs. I choose to try." The kiss that followed was nothing like I'd imagined. It was gentle, almost reverent, his lips soft against mine, as if I were something infinitely precious. His hands cradled my face with such tenderness that tears pricked my eyes. "Alessia," he breathed against my mouth. "My Alessia." "You're bad boy," I teased, pulling back to see his reaction. His laugh was surprised and genuine, transforming his severe features. "The worst. You have no idea." "Then show me," I challenged. "Show me your world, Vincenzo. The good and the bad. No more shields, no more protection from the truth. If I'm choosing this, I'm choosing all of it." "Are you sure?" he asked seriously. "Once you see, you can't unsee." "I'm sure." I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. I spent 8 days trying to talk myself out of this. 8 days trying to convince myself that the smart choice was to walk away. But I've never been good at smart choices. I'm much better at honest ones. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me in an embrace that felt like coming home. "Then let's be honest together. No more secrets, no more shields. Just you and me." And standing there in his study, surrounded by the trappings of a life I was only beginning to understand, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, exactly, but purpose. The choice was made. Now came the work of living with it, of learning to love a man whose hands were stained, but whose heart beat only for me. The weeks that followed my decision felt like living in 2 worlds simultaneously. By day, I was Alessia Amato, owner of Dolce Mattina, serving cannoli and brewing espresso for the neighborhood regulars. By night, I entered Vincenzo's world, learning the careful social dances of family dinners and business meetings where nothing was quite what it seemed. "This is Angelo." Vincenzo introduced me to a heavy-set man with cold eyes at a restaurant in Gold Coast. "He manages our construction interests." What he meant, Angelo handles the legitimate front for money laundering. "And this is Dante. He oversees shipping." What he meant, Dante coordinates the import of luxury goods that occasionally hide other, less legal items. I learned to read between the lines, to understand the careful language and loaded silences, learned which questions to ask and which to leave unspoken. Vincenzo never lied to me, kept his promise of honesty, but he taught me how to navigate a world where truth was often dangerous. "You're a natural," he observed one night as we drove home from a charity gala where I'd made pleasant conversation with the wife of a federal judge. The other wives like you. They trust you." "Should they?" I asked, still uncomfortable with my role in his empire. He took my hand, bringing it to his lips. "You're exactly who you've always been, Alessia. Honest, kind, genuine. That's why they trust you, and why I love you." The words hung in the air between us. He'd never said them before, not directly. "You love me?" I whispered. "From that first night in the bar when you called me a bad boy with such conviction." His smile was soft in the darkness of the car. "You saw through every defense I've built, saw the man underneath. How could I not love you?" "I love you too," I admitted, even though sometimes I think I'm crazy for it. "You probably are." His expression turned serious, which is why what I'm about to ask matters so much. Anxiety spiked in my chest. "What?" "Marry me." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "What?" He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring, a perfect emerald flanked by diamonds that caught the streetlights as we passed. "Marry me, Alessia." Not because it's expected, not because of my position, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you're the only honest thing in my world, and I'm selfish enough to want to keep you forever. Tears blurred my vision. "Vincenzo, I know it's fast. I know you have doubts. But I also know that what we have is real, is worth fighting for. Will you marry me?" Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to let myself fall completely into the safety of his love. But the part that had learned to navigate his dangerous world knew better. "Ask me again in 6 months," I said quietly. "After I've really lived in your world, after I know what being your wife means. If we still feel this way then, I'll say yes." Disappointment flickered across his features, quickly masked, but he nodded, closing the ring box. 6 months. Fair enough. The test came sooner than either of us expected. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after his proposal. I was opening the bakery. Rosa still hadn't arrived when the door burst open. 2 men entered, not the same Russians from before, but with the same energy of barely controlled violence. "Vincenzo Catalano," the taller one demanded. "Where is he?" "I don't know." My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. He doesn't tell me his schedule. Liar. The shorter man moved around the counter toward me. "You're his woman. You know where he is." I backed up, reaching behind me for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a rolling pin. "Get out of my bakery. Not until you tell us where to find him." The man lunged. I swung the rolling pin with all my strength, connecting with his shoulder. He bellowed in pain, and his companion rushed forward. I was outmatched, and we both knew it. As his hand closed around my wrist, I heard the sharp crack of the door slamming open. "Get away from her." Vincenzo's voice was death itself. He stood in the doorway flanked by 4 of his men, his expression so cold, so absolutely merciless that the men attacking me froze. "Boss, we were just... You touched what's mine." Vincenzo moved with terrifying speed, his fist connecting with the man's jaw in a punch that sent him crashing into the display case. Glass shattered, pastries flying. The fight that followed was brutal and brief. Vincenzo's men subdued the intruders with efficient violence while Vincenzo himself pulled me behind him, shielding me with his body. "Are you hurt?" His hands ran over me, checking for injuries. When he saw the red marks on my wrist where I'd been grabbed, something animal and vicious flashed in his eyes. "I'm okay," I assured him, even though I was shaking. "Vincenzo, I'm okay." He turned to the men being held by his guards, both now bloodied and clearly terrified. "Who sent you?" "The Volkov organization." The taller one spat blood. "They want to negotiate." "By attacking my fiancée?" Vincenzo's voice was deadly quiet. "In her place of business?" "We just wanted to get your attention. You have it." He looked at his men. "Take them to the warehouse. I'll deal with them later." Then to me, gentle despite the violence still lingering in his posture. "Come on, let's get you out of here." "No," I pulled away from his protective hold. "No, I'm not leaving." "Alessia." "This is my bakery, Vincenzo. Mine. I'm not going to let them chase me out of it." I looked at the shattered display case, the pastries scattered across the floor. "I need to clean this up. Need to salvage what I can. Then my men will help you." It wasn't a suggestion. For the next 2 hours, Vincenzo's feared enforcers swept glass and rehung the door that had been knocked loose. They worked in silence, these dangerous men, moving with surprising care around the fragile space of my bakery. Rosa arrived to find me directing them, her eyes wide with shock at the scene. "Madonna mia, what happened?" "An accident," I said, using the careful language I'd learned. "Everything's fine now." After the mess was cleaned and Rosa had been assured of her safety, Vincenzo pulled me aside. "You need to close the bakery for a few days, just until I can ensure this won't happen again." "No," I crossed my arms. "We talked about this. You don't make decisions about my business. Someone attacked you, Alessia. Grabbed you, threatened you, in your own bakery." His control was fraying, fear and fury mixing into something volatile. "I can't protect you if you won't let me." "I didn't say you couldn't protect me. I said you couldn't control me. There's a difference." "Is there?" He ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident. "Because from where I'm standing, keeping you safe requires control, requires making sure you're not vulnerable." "I will always be vulnerable," I said quietly. "That's the price of being with you. We both knew that going in." "That doesn't mean I have to like it." His voice broke slightly. "Doesn't mean I can watch someone hurt you and not destroy everything in response." I took his hands, feeling them tremble. "I know. But you have to trust me to make my own choices, even dangerous ones." 6 months, he said suddenly, fiercely. "That's how long you wanted before answering my proposal. Can you honestly tell me this hasn't changed your answer?" I looked around my bakery, at the men who'd cleaned up the aftermath of violence, at Rosa who'd stayed despite her fear, at Vincenzo whose hands held mine with desperate gentleness. "It's changed everything, and nothing." "What does that mean?" "It means I understand now what choosing you really costs, what being part of your world really means." I squeezed his hands. "And I'm still choosing you. But I need you to choose me too, Vincenzo. Not just my safety. Me. My independence. My right to make my own decisions, even when they terrify you." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something had shifted. "You're asking me to let go. I'm asking you to trust that I'm strong enough to stand beside you, not behind you." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. "No closing the bakery, but extra security, discreetly placed, and you carry this." He pulled a small device from his pocket. "Press the button, and my men arrive in under 2 minutes. Non-negotiable." I took the device, recognizing it as the compromise it was. "Deal. And Alessia?" He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. "When those 6 months are up, and I ask again, think about saying yes, because I don't think I can survive losing you." "Then don't lose me," I whispered. "Just love me. That's all I need." 3 months passed in relative peace. The attack on my bakery seemed to have established a boundary. Vincenzo's response, whatever it had been, was effective. No more men burst through my door with demands. No more threats. But the incident had changed something between us. Vincenzo struggled visibly with his need to protect me, and his promise to let me maintain my independence. I saw it in the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, in the careful questions about my day, in the increased security I pretended not to notice. "He loves you terribly," Rosa observed one morning as we prepared the day's first batch of focaccia. "Like it causes him physical pain." "I know," I said quietly. "And you? Do you love him back?" "Yes." No hesitation. 3 months ago, I would have qualified that answer. Now I knew the truth. I loved Vincenzo Catalano, bad boy and mob boss, with all his violence and tenderness, his control and vulnerability. I loved the way he looked at me like I was his salvation, the way he fought himself to give me the freedom I needed. The question of marriage hung between us, unspoken but present. We were nearly at the 6-month mark I'd requested. Soon he would ask again, and I would need an answer. The decision was made for me on a cold December morning. I woke in Vincenzo's bed, in the brownstone I'd been staying at more and more frequently, to find him already dressed and on the phone. His voice was tight, with barely controlled fury. "When?" A pause. "How many men?" Another pause. Longer. "I'm on my way." He noticed me awake and ended the call abruptly. "I have to go. There's a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where people die if I don't handle it personally." He crossed to the bed, cupping my face. "Stay here. Don't leave the house. My men will be outside." "Vincenzo, please, Alessia. For once, just do what I ask." He kissed me hard, desperately, then was gone. I tried to settle back into bed, but anxiety gnawed at me. Something about the call, about the look in his eyes, had been different. More urgent, more afraid. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I called his phone and it went straight to voicemail. Called again. Same result. I was reaching for my coat when Vincenzo's guard Marco appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Amato, Mr. Catalano asked me to inform you." "Where is he?" I demanded. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. "He's handling a business matter." "Don't lie to me, Marco. What's happening?" He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "The Volkov organization. They've taken 3 of our men. They want Mr. Catalano to meet with them personally to negotiate their release." Ice flooded my veins. "That's a trap." "Yes. And he's walking into it anyway." "Not a question. Those men are his responsibility. Their families depend on him. He won't leave them to die." I grabbed my coat, my mind racing. "I'm coming with you." "Mrs. Amato, that's not—" "I said I'm coming." I fixed him with the same fierce look I gave suppliers who tried to shortchange me on flour. "Take me to him. Now." The warehouse district on the south side was a maze of abandoned buildings and broken glass. Marco drove through it with grim efficiency, finally parking outside a corrugated metal structure that looked ready to collapse. "He'll be furious if you go in there," Marco warned. "Let him be furious." I was already out of the car, walking toward the entrance where 2 of Vincenzo's men stood guard. They tried to stop me. I used my fiercest bakery owner voice. "Let me through, or explain to your boss why you prevented his fiancée Musikian from entering. Your choice." They exchanged glances and stepped aside. The interior of the warehouse was cavernous and cold. I heard voices before I saw anyone, one in heavily accented English and Vincenzo's in response. "You want your men back?" the Russian was saying. "Then give us what we want. Territory, the docks, the construction contracts, everything." "And if I refuse?" Vincenzo's voice was calm, deadly. "Then your men die, and we keep taking more until you give us what we want." I rounded a support column and took in the scene. 3 of Vincenzo's men were on their knees, hands bound, guns pointed at their heads. Vincenzo stood across from them, alone and seemingly unarmed, facing a group of Russians led by a man I recognized from photographs, Sergei Volkov himself. "There has to be another way," Vincenzo said. "There is." Sergei's smile was cruel. "Give us the girl, the baker. She matters to you. She's worth territory, worth contracts. Give her to us, and your men go free." Everything in me went cold. They wanted to trade me for his men's lives. Never. The single word from Vincenzo was absolute. "She's not part of this." "Then your men die." Sergei raised his hand. "Wait." I stepped forward before my courage could fail. Every gun in the room swung toward me, but I kept my eyes on Vincenzo, on the horror and fury warring on his face. "Alessia, get out of here." His voice shook. "Now." "No." I looked at Sergei. "You want to trade me for those men? Fine, but I have conditions." "You're not trading anything," Vincenzo snarled. "Marco!" But Marco wasn't there. I'd made him wait outside, and the guards had apparently decided this was above their authority to stop. "What conditions?" Sergei asked, intrigued. "The men go free, all of them, including Vincenzo. And you give me your word as whatever you are, that they won't be harmed, that this ends the conflict. Done." "Alessia, no!" Vincenzo started toward me, but one of the Russians grabbed him, pressing a gun to his temple. "Let him go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You have what you want." "Indeed." Sergei gestured, and his men released Vincenzo's guards, who stumbled toward their boss, then to Vincenzo himself. "Go. Take your men. Leave the girl." Vincenzo's eyes met mine across the space between us, anguish and rage and love written in every line of his face. "I won't leave you. You have to." I kept my voice level. "Those men have families who need them. You have responsibilities. I'm just—" "You're everything," he interrupted, raw emotion breaking through his control. "You're my conscience, my redemption, my only honest thing in this corrupt world. I can't lose you." "Then trust me." I smiled, hoping it looked braver than I felt. "You said I made you want to be better. Let me help you be better. Let me save these men." "Touching," Sergei said dryly. "But we're on a schedule. Catalano, you leave now, or the deal's off and everyone dies." Vincenzo looked at me for a long moment, then did something that shattered my heart. He knelt, right there in that warehouse, this proud, powerful man, and bowed his head. "Please," he said to Sergei. "Take anything else. My territory, my money, my life, but not her. Please." Sergei laughed. "How the mighty have fallen. Get up, Catalano. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm begging you." Vincenzo's voice broke. "I'll give you everything. The docks, the construction, the shipping contracts. All of it. Just let her go." The warehouse went utterly silent. Even the Russians looked shocked. "You'd give up your empire?" Sergei asked slowly. "For a baker?" "For her, yes." I understood then what I was witnessing. Vincenzo Catalano, the feared Don, was sacrificing everything he'd built, everything he'd bled for, to save me. Not through violence or threats, but through surrender, through love. Interesting. Sergei studied us both. Very interesting. "Please," Vincenzo said again, and the naked desperation in his voice made my eyes burn with tears. "Sergei," I spoke quietly, and the Russian's gaze shifted to me. "If you let me go, you lose nothing. If you keep me, you make an enemy who will never stop coming for you. He'll give you the territory now, but he'll take it back. He'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Because that's what men like him do when they lose the thing they love most." Sergei considered this, then surprised us all by laughing. "You're right. And honestly, I have no interest in starting a war that will cost me more than any territory is worth." He looked at Vincenzo. "Get up. Take your woman. Take your men. Go." "What?" Vincenzo's head snapped up. "I'm not an animal." Sergei gestured dismissively. "This was never about the baker. This was about making you remember what it feels like to be human, to love something more than power. Congratulations, Catalano. You passed the test. Test? Vincenzo's voice was dangerous. My father was killed by a man who forgot how to be human, who saw people only as assets and enemies. I watched him become a monster. Sergei's expression turned grim. I wanted to see if you were the same. If you'd trade the woman you loved for territory, for 3 soldiers. You didn't. You were willing to give up everything. That makes you better than my father. Better than most of us. He waved his men back. Go. We'll negotiate territory like civilized people, not animals. And Catalano? Marry her. Women like that don't come along twice. The drive back to Vincenzo's brownstone was silent. His men took their own vehicles. Vincenzo and I sat in the back of the SUV, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. Neither of us spoke. We couldn't. Once inside, in the privacy of his study, the dam broke. Vincenzo pulled me against him, his body shaking. I thought I'd lost you. I know. I held him tightly, feeling wetness against my neck. He was crying, this powerful, dangerous man. Crying for me. Don't ever do that again, he demanded, his voice fierce. Don't ever risk yourself like that. I had to. Those men. Damn the men! He pulled back to look at me, his eyes red. I would have let them all die to keep you safe. Does that make me a monster? Probably. But I don't care. You're more important than anything. Than everyone. That's not true and you know it. I cupped his face. Those men have families. Children. You wouldn't have been able to live with yourself if they died because you were protecting me. Maybe not. He caught my wrists, holding my hands against his face. But I couldn't live without you either. The choice would have destroyed me. You understood that. That's why you walked into that warehouse. Why you offered yourself. Yes. Simple, honest. Marry me. Not a question this time. A plea. Not in 6 months. Now. Tomorrow. I can't wait anymore, Alessia. I need to know you're mine in every way that matters. I've been yours since I called you a bad boy in that bar, I said gently. Since you looked at me like I was the most interesting thing in your world. I'll marry you, Vincenzo. Not because I'm afraid or grateful or trapped, but because I love you. All of you. The bad boy and the good man you're trying to be. His kiss was different this time. Not desperate, but reverent. A promise and a beginning. We're terrible at this, he murmured against my lips. You know that, right? We almost got you killed today. We saved 3 men and potentially prevented a war, I countered. I'd say we're pretty good at it. At what? Being honest. Being partners. Being us. I smiled against his mouth. Besides, someone needs to be your conscience. Your bad boy needs redemption. I thought you didn't like bad boys. I don't, I admitted. But I love you, and that's the truth. He pulled me closer, and in the warmth of his embrace, surrounded by the shadows of his dangerous world, I found something I never expected. Home. Not in a place, but in a person. In the arms of a man who'd proven that love wasn't about control or possession, but about sacrifice. About being willing to lose everything to keep someone safe. My bad boy had taught me the most important lesson of all, that the truest form of love is letting go. And in learning that, he'd become exactly the man I needed him to be. Not perfect, but honest. And that was enough. 6 months after our wedding, I woke to find Vincenzo's side of the bed empty. Not unusual. He often rose before dawn to handle business that couldn't wait for reasonable hours. What was unusual was the sound of voices drifting up from the kitchen, low and urgent, with an edge that made my stomach clench. I pulled on my robe and padded downstairs, following the sound. Vincenzo stood at the kitchen island with Marco and 2 other men I recognized from his inner circle. They fell silent, the moment I appeared in the doorway. "What's wrong?" I asked, reading the tension in every line of Vincenzo's body. He exchanged glances with his men, then nodded toward the door. They filed out without a word, leaving us alone. Vincenzo poured himself an espresso from the machine, his movements precise but stiff. "The Volkov organization," he said finally, not meeting my eyes. "Sergei's dead, killed 3 days ago in Moscow. His cousin Dmitri has taken over, and he's not interested in maintaining our arrangement." Cold dread washed through me. What does that mean? It means everything we built, the peace, the understanding, it's gone. He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd rarely seen in his eyes. Fear. "Dmitri wants war. He's already hit 2 of our operations. He's coming for everything, and that includes you." I sank onto one of the kitchen stools, processing this. "So what do we do?" "We?" He crossed to me, taking my hands in his. "You don't do anything. I'm sending you somewhere safe, Montana maybe, or Italy, somewhere he can't reach you." "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. His jaw tightened. "Alessia, this isn't negotiable. You're my wife. Your safety is my decision," I interrupted, pulling my hands free. "We've had this conversation before, Vincenzo. You don't get to unilaterally decide what's safe for me. This is different." His voice rose with frustration. Sergei was a man of honor, twisted as that honor was. Dmitri is a rabid dog. He doesn't follow the old rules, doesn't respect boundaries. He'll use you to hurt me, and I can't. His voice broke. "I can't lose you." I stood, moving into his space, forcing him to look at me. "Then don't lose me. But don't send me away either. We face this together." "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly." I cupped his face, feeling the stubble rough against my palms. "I understand that if I run now, I'll spend the rest of my life running. That you'll never truly believe I'm safe, never stop looking over your shoulder. I understand that our marriage means standing together, especially when it's hard." Something shifted in his expression, pain and pride warring for dominance. "You're the bravest person I know, and the most stubborn." I learned from the best. I managed a small smile. "Besides, I have insurance." "What insurance?" I pulled away, moving to the coffee maker to fix my own cup. "Detective Donovan, the one from the Organized Crime Task Force. We've been talking." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Talking." His voice was dangerously soft. "What kind of talking?" "The kind where I've been documenting everything I learn about your world. Nothing that would incriminate you directly," I added quickly, seeing his expression darken. "But enough that if something happens to me, it all goes public. Every connection, every arrangement, every politician and judge in your pocket. Not just your family, Vincenzo. Everyone." He stared at me as if I'd become a stranger. "You've been building a case against me? Against everyone who might hurt me to get to you?" I met his gaze steadily. "It's mutually assured destruction. Insurance that no one can touch me without bringing down the entire system, Dmitri included." "And you didn't think to tell me this? Would you have let me do it if I had?" His silence was answer enough. He turned away, bracing his hands on the counter, his shoulders rigid with tension. "You've been lying to me. For months. I've been protecting myself." I moved closer, placing a hand on his back. "The way you taught me to. By being strategic, by thinking ahead. You said you wanted a partner, Vincenzo, not a possession. This is what partnership looks like." He spun to face me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. "How do I know you won't use it? That one day you won't decide you're tired of this life and burn everything down?" The question hung between us, exposing a vulnerability he'd never shown. For all his power, for all his control, he was afraid. Not of Dmitri or the Russians or any external threat, but of me, of the woman he'd given his heart to. Because I love you, I said simply. Because I chose this life, chose you, with my eyes wide open. Because the information exists to keep me safe, not to destroy you. It's a safeguard, nothing more. A safeguard you didn't trust me enough to tell me about. Would you have reacted differently if I'd asked permission first? I challenged. Or would you have forbidden it? Put guards on me to make sure I couldn't meet with Donovan, taken away the one piece of power I have in your world. He closed his eyes, and I watched him struggle with the truth. I don't know, he admitted finally. Probably yes. I would have tried to control it, to manage it, because that's what I do. That's how I keep people safe. But control isn't the same as safety. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. You can't control me into being safe, Vincenzo. You can only trust that I'm smart enough, strong enough, to protect myself. With your help, yes, but not under your complete control. He opened his eyes, searching my face. This is why you said yes when I proposed. Not just because you loved me, but because you'd already built your exit strategy. Partly, I admitted, but mostly because I believed you when you promised you'd let me go if I asked. This way, I made sure everyone else would too. A laugh escaped him, rough and unexpected. My clever wife. You've built a nuclear option. Our clever wife, I corrected. And yes, I have. Which means Dmitri can't touch me without consequences that would destroy him and everyone he's connected to. Which means you don't have to send me away or lock me in a tower. We can face this together. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me with familiar strength. You terrify me sometimes. You know that. Good. I rested my head against his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady and strong. Fear keeps people honest. We stood like that for a long moment, the kitchen gradually brightening with dawnlight. Finally, Vincenzo pulled back just enough to look at me. If we're doing this together, then we do it my way. You don't leave the house without security. You don't meet with anyone, including Donovan, without my knowledge. And you tell me everything from now on. No more secrets. Agreed, as long as you do the same. No protecting me from information because you think I can't handle it. No making decisions about my safety without consulting me first. True partnership. He nodded slowly. True partnership. And one more thing. I met his eyes. We expand the bakery. He blinked, clearly not expecting that. What? If I'm going to be living in constant threat of violence, I need something normal to hold on to. Something that's mine, that has nothing to do with your world. I want to open a second location, maybe a cafe component. I want to hire more staff, teach them my mother's recipes. I want to build something that matters. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You want to create life while surrounded by death. Yes, I smiled. Is that too much to ask? No. He kissed my forehead, gentle and reverent. It's perfect. We'll start looking at properties this week. The sound of footsteps made us both turn. Marco appeared in the doorway, his expression apologetic. Boss, sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Dimitri's men just hit the warehouse on Canal Street. 3 of our guys are injured, 1 critical. Vincenzo's entire demeanor shifted, the loving husband transforming into the cold, calculating Don. Get them to Dr. Ricci. I want every man we have on the streets by noon, and find out how they knew about that warehouse. Someone's talking. Marco nodded and disappeared. Vincenzo turned back to me, conflict evident in his expression. I have to go handle this. I know. I straightened his collar, a wifely gesture that felt surreal given the conversation we were having. Be careful. Always. He kissed me, hard and fast. Stay inside. Marco's leaving 2 men outside, and Rosa's coming over to keep you company. Vincenzo. Please, Alessia. Give me this one thing. Just for today. until we know what we're dealing with. I saw the fear beneath his control, the terror of losing me that drove every protective instinct. Okay. Just for today. After he left, I made myself busy in the kitchen, baking bread and cookies with the same methodical precision I used to calm my mind. Rosa arrived an hour later, her face drawn with worry. Dolcezza. She pulled me into a fierce hug. Are you all right? Marco called me, said there was trouble. We're fine. I handed her a cup of tea. Or we will be. She studied me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. You're different, since you married him. Harder somehow. Stronger, I corrected. I've learned to live in his world without losing myself in it. That takes a different kind of strength than I needed before. And you love him still? Even knowing what he is, what he does? I thought about that question, really considered it. Yes, I love him because I know what he is. Because he's never lied to me about it. Because every day he chooses me, chooses us, over the easy path of complete control. Rosa shook her head, bemused. Your mother would be proud and terrified. She'd understand. I smiled, thinking of my mother's fierce independence, her unwillingness to compromise her dreams. She taught me that love isn't about finding someone who makes life easy. It's about finding someone worth fighting for. The day passed slowly. I baked, Rosa gossiped about the neighborhood, and I tried not to watch the clock or check my phone every 5 minutes. Vincenzo texted once. Situation contained. Home by dinner. But dinner came and went with no sign of him. By 9, I was pacing the living room, my phone clutched in my hand. Rosa had gone home at 7, reassured by my promise that everything was fine. At 10:30, I heard the front door open. I rushed to the foyer to find Vincenzo leaning against the doorframe, exhausted and disheveled. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and I saw blood on his knuckles. You're hurt. I moved to him immediately, taking his hands to examine them. Not my blood. His voice was rough, empty in a way that frightened me. The man who talked, who told Dmitri about the warehouse. I had to make an example. I understood what he wasn't saying. He'd killed someone today. Not in self-defense, not in the heat of battle, but deliberately. As a message. Come on. I led him upstairs to our bathroom, sitting him on the edge of the tub while I filled it with hot water. Let's get you cleaned up. He let me undress him, uncharacteristically passive as I peeled away his ruined clothes and examined the bruises blooming across his ribs. When I helped him into the tub, he closed his eyes and leaned back, the water gradually turning pink from the blood on his hands. I knelt beside the tub, washing him with gentle efficiency. His hands first, scrubbing away the evidence of violence, then his hair, his face, his shoulders. Neither of us spoke. Words felt inadequate for the moment. Finally, when the water had gone cold and he was clean, I helped him out and wrapped him in a towel. In our bedroom, I made him lie down while I bandaged the worst of his bruises, my hands steady, despite the turmoil inside me. Say something, he whispered finally. Yell at me. Tell me I'm a monster. Something. You're not a monster. I lay down beside him, pulling him against me so his head rested on my shoulder. You're a man who made an impossible choice to protect the people who depend on you. I killed him, Alessia. Personally. I could have ordered someone else to do it. But I needed them to know. To understand that betrayal has a price. I know. And you can still touch me? Still hold me like this? I ran my fingers through his damp hair, feeling him tremble against me. Yes, because I know the weight of what you carry. I see the toll it takes on you. And I choose to be here anyway, to remind you that you're more than the violence, that you're also the man who eats sfogliatelle in my bakery, who listens to me complain about suppliers, who looks at me like I'm the only real thing in his world. You are. His arms tightened around me. You're the only thing that makes sense, the only thing that feels clean. We lay like that for a long time, his body gradually relaxing as exhaustion claimed him. Just before he fell asleep, he murmured, "I'm glad you built your insurance. Glad you're smart enough not to trust me completely." "I trust you with my heart," I whispered back. "Just not with my freedom. There's a difference." His soft laugh was the last thing I heard before his breathing evened out into sleep. The next morning, I woke to find a new message on my phone. Not from Vincenzo, but from an unknown number. Sergei's peace died with him. But perhaps a new arrangement can be found. Come alone to Rossi's at noon, or more of Catalano's men die. My hands shook as I read it. Dimitri. Somehow he had my number, knew I existed as more than just a name. I should wake Vincenzo, show him the message, let him handle it. Instead, I found myself texting back, "I'll be there." I left a note for Vincenzo, deliberately vague about where I was going. Then I called Marco, who was on security detail outside, and told him I needed to go to the bakery to handle an emergency. He protested, but I reminded him that Vincenzo had promised me autonomy in my business. Rossi's was a restaurant in neutral territory, owned by a family who served both sides of Chicago's organized crime without favoring either. I arrived at noon exactly, my heart hammering, but my expression calm. Dmitry Volkov sat alone at a table in the back. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the same cold eyes as the men who'd attacked my bakery months ago. But where they'd been thugs, he radiated intelligence and calculated cruelty. "Mrs. Catalano." He stood as I approached, a mockery of politeness. "Thank you for coming." "You didn't give me much choice." I sat across from him, keeping my hands visible on the table to show I wasn't armed. "What do you want?" "Direct. I appreciate that." He leaned back, studying me. "Sergei made a mistake with your husband. He got sentimental, saw honor where there was only weakness. I don't make those mistakes." "Then why am I here?" "Because I've done my research on you. Alessia Amato, the baker who married the mob boss, the innocent who walked into Catalano's world and somehow survived it." His smile was razor sharp. "Except you're not innocent anymore, are you? You've learned to play the game, built your own insurance policy with the police." My blood ran cold. He knew about Donovan. "How?" "I have people everywhere, including inside the police department." He leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to convince your husband to give me what I want. The docks, the construction contracts, the import operations, everything Sergei asked for. In exchange, I let you both live. And if I refuse, then I kill everyone you care about, starting with that sweet assistant of yours, Rosa, then your neighbors, your suppliers, every customer who walks into your bakery. I'll burn your world down piece by piece until there's nothing left but ashes and grief. And then, when you're completely broken, I'll kill you too. Slowly." The threat was delivered with such casual certainty that I believed every word. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution, just delayed. "There's a third option," I heard myself say. His eyebrow rose. "Oh?" "You let me finish my tea. I walk out of here. And tomorrow, every connection you have, every politician, every judge, every dirty cop gets exposed. Not just in Chicago. Everywhere your organization operates. New York, Moscow, everywhere. It all goes public." "You're bluffing. Am I?" I pulled out my phone, opening it to show him a document. "This is a dead man's switch. If I don't reset it every 24 hours, everything I've compiled gets automatically sent to every major news organization in the country. And trust me, I've been thorough. Your organization won't survive the exposure." His expression didn't change, but I saw calculation in his eyes. Sergei was right about one thing. You are interesting. I'm practical. I put my phone away. You want war with Vincenzo, fine, fight him directly, but leave me out of it. Because if I die, if anything happens to me, your entire empire comes down too. That's the deal. And Catalano knows about this meeting? Not yet. I stood, proud that my legs didn't shake. But he will. And he'll understand that this is how I chose to protect both of us, by making myself too dangerous to kill. Dmitri studied me for a long moment, then laughed. You really are extraordinary. Sergei saw it, and so do I. Very well, Mrs. Catalano. You have your deal. I won't touch you or your people. But the war with your husband continues. Fair enough. I turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you ever threaten me again, I won't wait 24 hours. I'll burn everything down immediately, including my own husband's operations. I've already accepted that cost. Have you? His silence was answer enough. I walked out of Rossi's with my head high, made it 3 blocks before the adrenaline wore off, and I had to lean against a building, shaking so hard I could barely stand. I'd just gambled everything on a bluff I prayed I'd never have to follow through on. My phone rang. Vincenzo. Where are you? His voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Marco said you went to the bakery, but you're not there. I'm on Taylor Street. Can you pick me up? Silence then. Stay where you are. I'm coming. He arrived 10 minutes later, pulling up in his Bentley with an expression that would have terrified me 6 months ago. Now I simply opened the door and slid in beside him. I met with Dmitri, I said before he could speak. He threatened me, threatened everyone I care about, so I threatened him back, with everything I have on his organization. He's agreed to leave me alone. Vincenzo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You did what? What I had to do, what you taught me to do. I used the only weapon I have. You could have been killed, Alessia. He could have, but he didn't. I took his hand, forcing him to look at me. Because I made myself more valuable alive than dead. Because I'm not just your wife anymore, Vincenzo. I'm a player in this game too. Maybe it's time you accepted that. He stared at me, emotions warring across his face. Fury, fear, pride, love. You're going to give me a heart attack. Better than making you a widower. I managed a shaky smile. Take me home. We both need to process what just happened. As he drove, I leaned my head against the window and realized something profound. I'd walked into Vincenzo's world as an innocent, someone who needed protection and guidance. But I'd become something else entirely. A partner who could stand beside him, who could make her own plays and face her own dangers. I'd become exactly what this life required. Someone brave enough to love a dangerous man, and strong enough to be dangerous herself. And somehow, against all odds, that was exactly who I'd always been meant to be.